Welcome to this free PR News LinkedIn live chat. Before we introduce our guests, I want to emphasize that for those of you who are watching live, that is, you should send us questions. We'd like to include them in the chat. Now to our wonderful special guest, John Kell. He is the media lead at Chobani. He's also a former full-time journalist at the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, and he continues to write as a freelancer at Fortune. He's a polymath for sure. He's a runner, a swimmer, and a yogi. He also, and we're surprising him with this, he also has one of the most eclectic Twitter feeds we've ever seen. And we will talk about that later, John. You can't escape this one. John, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So tell us, John, what does the media lead at Chobani do on a daily basis?
So the media lead at Chobani is the external partner, communicator that I work closely with the media for all of our storytelling opportunities. At Chobani, we do not have an agency that we work with. So we do all of our communications and PR in-house. So I work with the team on anything from a product launch announcement, some corporate news, working with executives for some of their speaking opportunities and interviews, prepping for those interviews and scheduling them. And also just storytelling beyond that, where we feel that Chobani has a voice and a role to play. And that can be a variety of things like supporting our local communities in upstate New York and Idaho, where we have our 2 manufacturing plants here in the States, or food insecurity, or the work that we've done with the Chobani Pantry, which is donating millions of products across the US throughout the COVID-19 crisis to help food banks. So it's a variety of storytelling opportunities that we want to highlight about the company, and then also what the company stands for beyond yogurt.
Great. So, of course, I'm sure people who are watching this now are, the immediate question is, well, a couple of questions. One, what does your past life as a full-time journalist bring to the table now, and how do you maybe pitch differently or work differently because of the experience you've had at the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones and still as a freelance journalist?
Yes. One thing that I try to really, I always want to make the journalists that I work with closely know that I value that relationship. I value the relationship of the local Idaho reporter just as much as I value the relationship of the Wall Street Journal food reporter. I don't look at one as more important than the other. They're both very important for different reasons, because we're talking to different stakeholders, different audiences for those 2 outlets. So I really prioritize my relationships with reporters, and I have a group of people that I work with frequently, that I go to frequently for storytelling. It's really about relationships. And I felt like when I was a reporter, the PR reps that I liked the most and that I worked with the most were the ones that I trusted, where I felt like they understood what I covered and they understood my process and what I was looking for from interviews, and kind of tailored their communications to my needs. I know that that's something that everybody knows in PR, but it's just the golden rule. And I think the thing that I try to keep in mind is when I was a journalist at Fortune and the Journal, I probably got like 100 pitches a day, and I maybe wrote 1 story of those 100. So I know the math that I'm going against when I'm pitching stories about Chobani. And I keep that in the back of my head all the time. I know that journalists are busy. Newsrooms have shrunk a lot in the last decade. And I try to keep all that in mind, to be respectful of their time and to only reach out to journalists when I feel like the story would be a good fit for them.
Let me ask you about the time we're in now. I mean, we have to ask this question. We're in a time where newsrooms are smaller. Reporters are doing a lot more with fewer resources. Reporters are moving all over the place because of furloughs and layoffs.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of all that? And beyond that, how do you approach people perhaps differently? You just said that you only approach when you have something of value for the journalist. Is your approach a little bit more familiar, more folksy in this time where we all know we're we at least have at least one thing in common, that we're all fighting this COVID-19.
So the golden rule that I have with that is, if I've met you in person or I know you personally, I feel like I can kind of cross that boundary a little bit and be more familiar. Like with the food reporter at the Wall Street Journal is a personal friend. I went to her wedding. So I can talk to her in a way that I'm not going to talk to the food reporter at CNBC, who I've never even met in person, especially with COVID. So I kind of I try to be friendly with everybody and be respectful of the moment that we're in. People are really stressed. Like you said, people are living in places they didn't maybe expect. I don't know what's going on with people's families in terms of health or illnesses. It's a really tough time. So I try to be really respectful of that, but I don't want to encroach in their personal lives. And I always felt like I was a little disingenuous when I was a reporter. I hated when people commented on things that they saw on my Instagram, my personal Instagram, like, oh, I saw you ran a race last weekend and I don't know you. Why are you commenting on that? It's very weird. So I try to be personable and respectful, but not cross that line, because we are working together.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance, is essentially what you're saying. Yeah. I want to bring it back to what you just said, that the top reporters at the big papers, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, are just as important as the food writer at a local paper in Iowa. It's interesting. I don't know if Nicole can bring this up on the screen, but we literally just today published a story online about an esports company that wanted to do some media relations, and their tack was that not only do we want to get big headlines, but maybe the way to get big headlines is to pitch to local reporters and make sure that not lose track of the national stories, but definitely push hard on local. And oh, there we go. Yeah, see, kind of an interesting story. So tell me, when you get a particular story, or how does this happen? When you get a story, say from corporate or somebody in the company, do you look at that idea and say, gee, this would be a great story for a local pitch as opposed to a national pitch? And how does that go? And I can imagine an executive might say, well, gee, I don't want it in an Iowa paper. I'd rather have it in the Wall Street Journal. How does that go?
So I think it's a case-by-case basis. So for example, when we launch a product, we do basically 2 really big product launches a year in the yogurt world because of resets, when retailers kind of look at the category and say, what do we want to keep and what do we want to add? We have a plant in New York that makes specific products, and we have another plant in Idaho that makes a different set of products. So I spend my time researching internally what's made in Idaho and then what is made in New York, so I can do that local pitching to those reporters and say, what's so exciting about Chobani oat, which we launched a year ago, is that we expanded our plant in Idaho, and this is a new product from us, so it's a new category. The Idaho reporters are then more interested in the story because it's made locally. There's employees that live in their community that are making this product. It's exciting to them. The reporters in Central New York might not care as much, and that's okay. We'll go to them when we feel like there's a good story for them to tell in terms of product innovation. There's other cases where, for example, we saw some headlines a couple years ago about school lunch debt shaming, where students were not given a hot lunch because their parents could not afford to pay for their lunch. They kind of fell in between the cracks of like getting a free meal and being able to pay for it themselves. And we thought that this was really wrong. We were very upset about it. And there was a case where this happened in Rhode Island, and everyone internally at Chobani was talking about it for a day. And we just decided, let's just pay off the school lunch debt at the school because this is unacceptable. From the comms perspective, a lot of reporters nationally were writing the story because it kind of got, it was written by the New York Times and Vox, and Today.com and GMA, like a ton of outlets were covering it, ABC, CNN, and we decided to only reach out to the Rhode Island reporters first. Give them this, they were covering it super closely and aggressively, and we thought if they cover this first, it'll expand. And that's exactly what happened. The local reporters and those news stories are still watched by national outlets. And we really benefited from, I think, that strategy. We did a similar thing recently where we donated some product to, in the name of a 10-year-old kid. His name is Orion Jean in Fort Worth, Texas. He was trying to get 100,000 meals donated before Thanksgiving for families in need, which is a great mission. And we worked with the local food bank that we donated our product to in his name. And that food bank just emailed some outlets in Fort Worth, and then it kind of expanded from there. So local is, I think, super important.
Yeah. So we just had a very nice comment from a viewer who said the same thing and said one of the nice things about local stories is that you don't have all the national political diatribe running throughout the story. It's funny because that's exactly the there it is, Judith Drucker. That's exactly the point that you just made, and it was also in our story online today. It's interesting. Let's talk. We're at the end of 2020. Let's talk about next year. Let's talk about 2021. We just, in PRNEWS, we just did our annual predictions issue. And so I'm in a sort of a predictions mood. There it is. You can see it. We had about 25 people predicting all kinds of things about PR and communications. Very interesting reading. John, what are you looking forward to? What kinds of things do you want to see communicators, particularly with media relations, experiment with in 2021?
I know that one theme that was brought up in that report is diversity and inclusion, and I think it's a very important topic, and it's a very important issue in our society. It needs to go. I really strongly encourage communicators and brands to go beyond boilerplate statements that sound very nice but don't actually result in action. I think we have to look internally at our own organizations. Our firms need to look at themselves. Clients need to look at themselves and say, where are we falling short and where do we need to improve upon this? And I'm even more attuned and aware of this as I am talking to you as a white man. So I have to do my fair share of not talking and listening to women, to people of color, to other marginalized groups, and give them the space to tell me how our organization can be better for them. I think it's crucial. I think consumers want it. I think that companies want to do it, but they need to be brave to say, how do we do this beyond, we stand for diversity and inclusion statements, which frankly don't do anything.
Right.
And I think if you go to the press, like one other thing I would like to say about this is if you're going to go to the press about this, I think you kind of need to go from like a humble perspective and say, like, this is where we're at in terms of our goals, in terms of maybe hiring more women or more people of color, and here's where we want to go. These are the changes we want to make, and this is maybe the amount of time that we want to make those changes. We've seen some companies do that. I think we should hear more, but it helps to kind of say, like, this is the benchmark we're working off of, and this is the actionable goals you're going to see us try to achieve. Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies came out with statements that, we support BLM and this and that. A few of them announcing chief diversity officers, and it's remarkable how few seem to then back up what they're doing with any kind of data.
Yeah, one example of this, I think, and this was actually probably one of my projects at Chobani in the 2.5 years I've been here, is Chobani was a sponsor of Boise's Gay Pride event in June. And a reporter there was really smart and emailed a bunch of the corporate sponsors and said, what are you doing beyond writing a check for this event?
Right.
Most companies decline to comment. They wouldn't say anything. They don't want to comment on legislation. And Chobani came out and said, we support the Equality Act. We are against discrimination against the LGBTQ people. That should be in every state, including Idaho. And it's great to see that. It's great to be at a brand that will take the stand and go that little extra step beyond diversity and inclusion, which, again, it's not actually going to make a difference in people's lives. So I think that brands need to think about, if we're going to stand for something, like, we need to really stand for it. And it's really important. And I think reporters are more skeptical than ever. A lot of outlets have hired reporters that cover this space.
Right.
So they're going to be more aggressive in what they let brands get away with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you anticipate seeing more, I hate to call them gotcha stories, but more intelligent reporters, more, how do I put this? I was just reading about cybersecurity the other day, and a communicator who specializes in cybersecurity said, look, the reporters who generally cover data breaches, they're not the reporters who cover your beat. They are very specialized. You cannot get away with giving them a garden variety holding statement about your data breach. They're going to go back and they're going to look up what happened, and you best be transparent with them. Will, do you think 2021 is going to be a reckoning for brands in terms of DEI and other things, any kind of diversity and gender gaps and things like that? Do you anticipate seeing more of that?
Yeah, I would say like 10 years ago, there was this trend, like when the Facebooks of the world were coming up, there was this trend of fawning CEO profile type stories. These companies were making big changes to our society. They were creating really interesting and innovative products. And, Airbnb came out. Like, these kind of companies come out with really great propositions, really interesting technology, really cool concepts, doing things that no one had thought could be done before. And I think that the press responded pretty favorably to that. And then we saw some bad actors. And I think about the Theranoses of the world.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So at Fortune, as an example, I used to work at Fortune, and I still freelance for them, as you mentioned, occasionally. And we had Theranos' CEO on the cover. And then we had to kind of look back on that a couple years later and realize that, we dropped the ball a little bit editorially over there at Fortune. I think that they would admit that as well. And with that comes more skepticism. And I think we've seen that in recent years. I think it kind of started with Me Too. There was some coverage a couple years ago that started about the environment that women faced at work in a variety of sectors. Now we're seeing that with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think we'll continue to see that. I think reporters are going to, and editors, be continually a little skeptical of what companies are saying. It's the pendulum has kind of swung in the other direction, and I think that'll continue in 2021.
I've got to ask you this question. Being an astute journalist, and based on what you just said, have there been times when you were, and you don't have to give us specifics, but have there been times when you've been counseling executives who come to you and say, I want to do A, B, and C with the press here, and you go back to them and say, no, that's not going to work?
The great thing about Chobani is that, and this is why I love working for this company, is that they really do value my view of what's going on with the press. I think partly because I was a former journalist. I actually previously interviewed Chobani's CEO and founder for a story, and also the president, who I currently work for, both of these people. So I've been on the other side. I think that they really get what the comms team broadly, like not just myself, the team I work with, how we view the landscape and what's feasible from an earned media perspective. They really understand that there is an element of unpredictability when it comes to earned media. And people always push harder. We always want more coverage, of course, with our announcements, but we also work within the reality of the environment. I think in 2020, with the pandemic, with it being a presidential election year, we knew that the storytelling opportunities there would be unique challenges in
Right.
that year that obviously, at the start of the year when you're doing your 2020 planning, you had no idea that was going to happen. I think going into 2021 and beyond, we'll continue to evolve and kind of look at what is working in comms and how can we play a role in that.
Okay. Talking about diversity and gender gaps, and I've got to look at one of your tweets recently. And in fact, I think it was yesterday.
Scared of what this says.
Yes. Well, here it goes. And you wrote, by the way, I totally recommend people following your Twitter feed. It is at John, JOHN, NER, and then your last name, Kell, KELL.
This is not me. Is this me? Yes.
Yeah, there it is. You wrote the other day, you tweeted the other day, I've been playing a lot of chess on my phone after watching and then reading The Queen's Gambit. And I'm sad to report I am not going to be a child prodigy. I also like this one you wrote, can someone please write a story about why everyone now says 100% all the time? This is a new trend the last 1 or 2 years, and I'm 100% guilty of it. And, finally, you tweeted, I saw a woman wearing a t-shirt that said, 2020 was still better than my marriage. John, what are we supposed to take away from this eclectic philosophy? It's great, by the way.
Thank you. I don't have any strategy with my Twitter, which is probably not good. I just want to be like a normal human. I think that's how, you should be. I try to, I don't know. I have no defense for it. I hope people find it amusing. I don't have a Facebook anymore. So a lot of the things that I would have said on Facebook have now gravitated towards Twitter. And I hope that Chobani doesn't have a problem with it. They haven't said anything to me yet, so that's good. I try to keep it light. When I saw that woman's shirt about her divorce, I literally laughed on the street. I thought that was so funny. And I am so bad at chess, I had to slide the difficulty meter to like super easy because I was losing terribly to the machine. So hopefully in 2021, I'll be a little better.
Okay. I mean, anybody who can tweet that their favorite part of Thanksgiving is stuffing, wins in my book. John, it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. I hope we get you back here soon. I also want to thank our producer, Nicole Schumann, who's done a great job here today. And I also want to thank everybody who's tuning in. And we hope that you will look at our Twitter feed in the coming days to see the next LinkedIn Live chat. And since we were talking about media relations, you got to love the synergy here, John. I also want to remind everybody about our media relations event next week, December 8th and 9th. Don't you love how that works, John? Isn't that wonderful? No. Anyway, Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for watching and be safe. Thanks again, John.
Thanks, Nicole.
Okay.